Welcome. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our presentations about executive function. We'll be discussing the advantages of teaching executive function strategies in general classrooms, in special education settings, and in all learning environments. If you think about it, executive function strategies underlie everything that we do in life. If you go to the supermarket, you need to plan, you need to organize, you need to think ahead about what you really need. Otherwise, those huge supermarket aisles are going to be very distracting. You can spend an entire morning trying to decide which cereal you're going to buy for, for the next day. If you're not very focused and you haven't prioritized and you haven't set your goals and you haven't figured out how quickly you're going to be in and out of that store. So executive function underlies, that's what we refer to as executive function, which underlies that kind of activity. If you look at the next part of the slide, when we plan a vacation, you have to decide how much money you're going to spend, where you're going to go, how far you want to go, how much travel time you want, where you want to find a hotel, what you're going to be doing when you get there, what you're going to do if there's rain, or if some of your plans have to be changed and you have to be flexible. So there's a huge amount of planning, prioritizing, organizing, thinking flexibly, and self-monitoring. When kids play on a soccer team or in any sport, they're involved, they use executive function strategies to kick the ball to another student on the field. They have to think ahead, like, what do I want to do? Well, I want to get the ball to the goal. Who should I kick the ball to? What's going to be my first pass? How am I going to get that to them? How am I going to avoid all these people who are on the attack? And similarly, most importantly, academics, reading, writing, complex math problem solving, note taking, studying, all involve executive function strategies. So I want to begin by quoting from Ben, who's 24 years old, who was one of our students, and as an adult, and he talked about so much emphasis being placed in our society on being smart and successful. And the fact that for kids with learning and executive function difficulties who feel like learning is outside of their control, this can feel like a death sentence. There's this feeling of I'm clogged, I'm stuck, I don't know where to go, and I'm anxious, and I feel like I can't manage. And Chase, another former student who is now a social worker, and talks about the fact that being a kid with executive function difficulties is incredibly stressful. It's horrifying. You have no idea what you missed. You're disoriented, embarrassed, often mad at yourself, and filled with a feeling of helplessness. The stress is often overwhelming. So think about it from kids' perspectives, how they feel, that emotion, that anxiety, it all interacts with when they don't have these executive function strategies. And so what we need to do as adults, as teachers, is to empower our students to understand how they learn with metacognitive awareness, and then to empower them to learn these strategies and to apply them to their academic work, as well as all aspects of life. And so the paradigm that guides all our work that we've published, and then I hope you'll hold in your mind as I discuss these different concepts, is that executive function strategies are the foundation for building resilience and academic success. That's sort of teamed with metacognition, which I'll focus on today. That's self-understanding. When students have that metacognitive awareness, they are willing to put more effort into their work. Their self-concept improves. They are more emotionally regulated. And that then builds resilience and academic success so that they can be successful and they are empowered to learn how to learn. So let's begin with the very first question. What is executive function? And for each of these questions, I'll be touching on the issues. If you would like to explore these issues further, please take a look at some of our publications at our website and at the publications of other experts in this field. So executive function has been defined differently by many different researchers, But overall, it's an umbrella term for all of the complex cognitive processes that control flexible, goal-directed behavior, the coordination and synthesis of multiple processes and subskills. And those various processes interact, as you'll see in this Rubik's Cube paradigm. So I love to use the analogy of a Rubik's Cube to explain executive function, because the point that I always make, and that everyone in this field makes, is that all of these processes are interconnected. They don't exist in isolation. So when we talk about goal setting, which is the one important process, that interacts with organizing and prioritizing. It organizes with shifting flexibly, or what we call cognitive flexibility, with self-monitoring. In other words, self-checking, editing, and monitoring behavior as well as academic performance. And then with working memory, being able to access information in working memory and to juggle it. And so these are what we see as the core executive function processes. And so as part of our various approaches to teaching executive function, and as part of SMARTS, actually, we ask even from the earliest ages, from 6, 7-year-olds, we teach them about it, and we ask them then to explain what metacognition and executive function are about. And this student talked about it, that executive function is like an orchestra conductor who's putting together all the different musical instruments in the orchestra, which is an analogy that's often used, and helping that orchestra to produce wonderful music with all these different instruments and players. And that's what executive function processes are about. So why are these processes, executive function processes, critically important for both in-class and remote learning and teaching? Well, as you can see from the slide, and as we know so well, students are dealing with so many different overwhelming components during learning, and especially during COVID. Students have to learn independently, which means they have to structure the minutes and hours of each day. They've had to estimate time for their schoolwork, for their sports and their activities, and most importantly, for their friends. And they've had to schedule and pace their learning, their reading, their writing, their long-term projects, their studying. And of course, they're balancing that with all these distractions: Facebook, Google, all the social media, being in touch with their friends online, and all the other distractions that they would prefer to be involved with. So executive function strategies are key. And what we talk about in our work, the paradigm that we've used, that I've published in 2007 originally, is that of a clogged funnel, that students often feel like they're on overload. And so do we as adults. There's all this information coming into the brain, and we need to be able to set goals, to organize and prioritize, so we can sift and sort and figure what's important and what we can ignore safely. We need to think flexibly. We need to be able to access our working memories, to juggle that information. We need to be able to self-monitor and self-check in order to keep this funnel unclogged. And that's the goal during instruction, is to try to teach kids strategies so that this funnel is unclogged, and that level of anxiety and frustration don't build up. So to quote a number of students from, and this can begin at the very earliest ages and build up: "I get so frustrated. I have all these ideas in my mind. I can't figure out how to start writing. I just get stuck and I give up." And I think probably many of you can think of many of your students and your kids, your own kids, and how they feel when they have an assignment where they just don't know where to begin. That funnel is clogged. They need to recognize and use strategies that can help them to get that funnel unclogged as quickly as possible, so they can be productive, efficient, and less frustrated. So the key is to integrate attention with effort and emotional regulation. These are the processes that interact. If you have limited attention because of attention difficulties or simply executive function difficulties, it's going to be hard to focus on what the important ideas are. when students use strategies, use these executive function strategies, their effort increases because they're empowered. They feel like they're going to be productive if they use these strategies, and they're going to be better regulated emotionally. They're not going to have meltdowns because they're going to feel successful. So think about these interactions constantly, and think of the students in your classrooms who are anxious, who are even bordering on depression. There's been a very high level of anxiety during this past year. As we know, it's increased because students have felt that they don't have control over their own learning process. So our goal is to give them that control through self-understanding and through executive function strategies. So to quote Ben, the student I quoted at the beginning, I'm going to take you through some of his profile. He's now an adult, a very successful scientist. But he's quoting how he felt when in 7th grade. When I got a big assignment, I didn't understand. I just got so angry because I spent an hour staring at a blank Word document. I couldn't figure out how to start. It was really tough and incredibly stressful. That's the interaction I was just talking about. This interaction between executive function, effort, self-concept, and emotional regulation. So we've talked about what is executive function. We talked briefly about why executive function strategy is so important now in our 21st century classrooms. And let's talk briefly now about what is metacognitive awareness. And we use this analogy of the thinker. So it's thinking about how you think, thinking about how you learn. And when we build and teach these strategies, we begin with metacognitive awareness, and then that's the foundation for executive function strategies. And then if we can, we layer on peer coaching with peer mentoring. So metacognitive awareness, or what we call metacognition, refers to self-understanding. How do I think? How do I learn? How do my strengths and weaknesses affect my learning? And what strategies work best for me? That's that self-understanding that connects with strategy instruction. So from the earliest grades, we need to teach kids to think about how they're thinking and how they're learning and how they're feeling. And for kids, for adults, the issues that one reflects about was, I'm not sure what this is about. If we go counterclockwise on this slide, how do I figure out the main idea? How do I get started with my writing? And going back to the top on the right-hand side, what do I know about this topic? So accessing their foundational knowledge, as well as where did I get stuck on this math problem? That's self-monitoring and self-checking. So that thinking about my thinking is being able to sit down and analyze what's problematic so that kids can reach some kind of a solution. How do we foster metacognitive awareness? So we can promote the self-understanding in students so they learn how to learn. We need to help students to keep that funnel unclogged as they think about their thinking. So let's link the two, the self-understanding with the executive function strategies. And let's think about those 6 areas we talked about a little while ago. First of all, goal setting. How do I set doable goals? That's sort of a metacognitive process where students think through that. Organization. How do I organize my time and my ideas? Prioritizing. How do I figure out what is most important for my reading and my writing? Cognitive flexibility. What is another way that I can solve this math problem? Working memory. How do I remember all these details for my quizzes and tests? An issue that is always challenging for students as they study and as they figure out what do they need to discard, what's relevant and what's irrelevant. And then self-monitoring. How do I find my mistakes when I check my work? So all of these issues are important. These are just examples of the kinds of metacognitive thinking strategies that students can employ when they are thinking about these executive function strategies and how they approach their work.